Hey everyone, George Wood, the Tattooed Pastor, and welcome back to the Sober Truth Podcast. Here we are, it's Season 4, Episode 1. Today I meet with Brian Layne, my partner in crime, but today we are just on a podcast talking about recovery. Things that make the journey better, things that make it harder, and things that help us to grow. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and be sure, hit subscribe so you don't miss anything, like the video and share it so others don't miss anything, and come back to check out for more content coming your way soon. Peace.
Crazy world to be living in, a crazy time to be living in right now, or at least so it seems. And I think people are looking for just peace. People are looking for some kind of center, some stability, and especially in recovery, you've already come out of chaos, and now it looks as though that chaos is all around us again, and so that can be very scary, especially in recovery. I don't remember a time when, the budget ceiling or the debt ceiling and all the politics were so mainstream, but they are right now. And, and it can definitely be disquieting to the soul. And so I think today, we should talk a little bit about that and finding that center, finding that peace, finding that hope. Yeah, that's it, Bob. I don't know what's going on here, but
What's interesting? I'm just sitting here, and as you said that, and I was thinking about, I think as a aspect of what we're trying to do is to try to help the world understand recovery differently. And so I actually think a message to those not struggling, but that are around people that are struggling is applicable in a sense that when I was in my hardcore addiction, I didn't know who the president was. I didn't know what month it was, what day it was. I could care less about anything other than getting high, staying alive, one more day, getting booze, getting whatever.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, like when you're totally stripped down to nothing, you literally don't care about any other thing that is really going on.
Whatever.
Right?
100%, bro. Listen. Were you done with your thought? Because I don't want to cut you off.
Listen.
Yeah, what you just said was profound, because in 2000, I was getting high. I was running the streets, smoking crack and doing all kinds of drugs, whatever I could get my hands on. But it was 2008, and everybody remembers 2008. That was the big crisis. I was oblivious. All I knew is I was able to hustle up my money and go get high. And it's so funny what a vacuum that leaves when we actually get sober, like the lack of care, the lack of like peripheral thought, like where we're just so absorbed in our purpose and mission of getting high, staying high, and maintaining that high.
Right.
That's all we care about. I need that. I need that right now, in life, when it comes to like purpose and focus. And I think a lot of other people kind of not miss the drugs and the chaos and the consequences, but they miss that lack of, care, in a sense. Like, I'm not wrapped up in this. I'm not miserable because of what I'm seeing on social media or I'm seeing on the news or anything like that. And man, how do we find that? And I found it, but how do we have that laser precision focus when it comes to our purpose and our dedication to that purpose? Or how do we even, let's even walk back even further. We've already, our main purpose when we were getting high was to get high, to get the ultimate sting, the ultimate hustle, to, hit the grand prize lick, as they say in the streets. And now I'm sober. I've been sober, or I'm recovering from whatever. And what's my purpose other than not do drugs? It's kind of crazy. And then you got all of this other, it's kind of a compound effect. You got the chaos.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, there is something special about that way that we view the world, that when we're in our addiction, we can hyper focus on what matters. and shut everything else out.
Man,
And that if we can harness that superpower, right?
there's got to be a way.
If we can bring that superpower into how we walk out our recovery, we will be super achievers at whatever we put our hands to. And I think it's just even the way we view the world. I had a meeting this morning with leaders in recovery that have many years, and I had to remind even them, as they were talking about the people they're discipling, and how somebody brought up one of his guys had just bought a new house, and the guy asked him, should I be grateful that I got this house? And he's like, I had to whip him into shape and say, you should be so grateful you got that new house. You should, not even blink an eye, right? And so I had to be like, well, let me remind you that you're spending a fair amount of time complaining these days about just about everything that you should be grateful for, because I remember meeting you strung out on heroin, that you just wanted to be alive and have just the bare minimum of a bed and a place to be safe and people that cared about you. You got all that, and how quickly it progresses to, no matter what you have, eventually you're no longer grateful with it. So there's an important lesson in there that is like, man, if we can hyper focus like we did in our addiction, and if we can hyper focus on our gratitude in our recovery, dang, we'll be golden, right?
100%. Listen, it reminds me of the story of the children of Israel and how they were taken out of bondage, taken out of addiction. Now they're in recovery, and they're on the journey to recovery, and heading towards the promised land. But as they always say in the Christian circles, the Egypt had to be worked out of them. And but they got delivered from oppression, and so did we. But they started complaining and grumbling and wanting to go back into bondage because it was what was familiar. Isn't that the way addiction is? And then they were complaining about their newfound freedom because they actually had to learn how to be responsible with that freedom and actually cultivate the right attitude and the right mindset to appreciate and maintain that. And what you're saying is absolutely true. Like a lot of us, when we get sober, when we come out of these bad addictions and stuff, and life starts to turn around for us, there's some chemical things going on there too. So I don't want to neglect that, but on an appreciation level, our fun level, our excitement level has been burnt. All the wiring for it has been just frayed and destroyed from all the drug abuse and everything like that. So what normal fun, what would just send somebody over the roof for, we purchased our first home. This is exciting. Oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Finally, for us, it's like, I purchased my first home. And it's like, yay, should I be happy? So what that tells me is, what that lets me know is that there's a process of cultivation, of rewiring the circuitry in our brain, that we have to actually be intentional, which most people don't have to, but because of the damage that was sustained at the hand of trauma and our own self-abuse, we have to actually go in and be intentional about cultivating those new realities, those new wirings in our brain.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, this morning I did a little sort of test where I said, okay, real quick, take just a few seconds, point out something that stuck out to you that you did last week, good or bad. And there was a room of 5 guys, and literally, like, I mean, they're sitting there, I can't think, like, yeah, I don't know. And I'm like, do you realize that there's some people that if you ask them what's something that stuck out in your life last week, they can pretty quickly be like, oh yeah, I had this interaction with my boss or my neighbor, or they know. But I go, you guys can't. I said, I can't either. So I'm not knocking you. But the point is to recognize that when you've went through severe trauma, let's just look at it this way. If you ended up in hardcore addiction, chances are almost 100% that you sustained early on trauma in your life as a child. So childhood trauma leads to addiction. So because of that, then you're in your addiction. And then when you're in your addiction, you do self-imposed trauma that you do to yourself. And I brought up, like, how many times did we have things going in our favor, and then we decide to start getting high, but we put ourselves in environments where we're like, does anybody know? I hope I don't get caught. People are asking you, and you're like, that's so stressful. So we live that way in that high stress, plus the stress that we had that was early on in our trauma has caused us to live in trauma response to everything that happens in our life. And I love how you said that, cultivating, because what if we don't begin to cultivate a life of being present, cultivating like, this is where I am in every moment, taking into account every moment, being grateful for certain things, and moving past other things, we're going to actually live a life. And I just thought of this morning for the first time. I'm like, man, I don't want to be on my deathbed, and when somebody's like, what do you remember about your life, and have that same, I don't know, response.
That's profound beyond what we can even appreciate right now. And cultivation itself, and I love how our conversations go. I just love how we flow into something different, but this is perfect. We start off with one thing, but I think it's all relative and it all relates. But the process of cultivating, while at the same time healing. We talked about this yesterday when we were at the office, and that's a balance, and it's messy, and it's not easy. If everybody could get sober, which everybody has the opportunity and the possibility of being sober, but if it was easy, everybody would do it, and everybody would know there would be no relapses. And what happens a lot of times in early recovery is when it's time to put the work in, it becomes too arduous. The emotions of it, we're experiencing these emotions, not the kind of emotions that we want, obviously, because when we get something awesome, we can't appreciate it. And when we're just trying to be normal, we're living in turmoil inside because we've got all these things rearing their ugly heads. We're dealing with, out of balance sexualities. We're dealing with, traumas, and you're talking about, being reactionary, living in that, defensive mode, so to speak, a little bit more than that. But it can be really, really uncomfortable, and it's not for the faint of heart. So like I was telling you the other day, the fact that whoever's listening to this, the fact that you're sober gives testament to the strength of the person that you are, that you have, that you possess, because you're still sober and you're actually trying. And so that lets you know right there that you have what it takes to put in the work in order to maintain sobriety, or to recover from trauma, or to continue the journey to getting better. So that brings us to that cultivation aspect, which we've been talking about for the last few minutes. How do we even do that? How do we even start on that journey? And like I was saying at the beginning, how do we balance that? How do we balance healing with cultivating the right mindsets and the right attitude? What comes first? Do we need to just primarily focus on healing at first, or do we need to do both, or what?
For me, I think like every journey begins with the first step of acknowledging I'm on a journey. And so often, and this is where I think the recovery space has some room to improve and to grow, is that I think like everyone can get sober. Not everyone can stay sober. And so when we start to think about why can't people stay sober, I think a lot of times, not always, but a fair amount of times, it's because the expectation of what is going to happen, right? And you brought up the Israelites, and that's a heavy theme throughout the book, The Uncovery, where it's like their expectations of entering the promised land and actually entering the promised land, and actually what happens after entering the promised land are all jacked up. So It's not until they march around Jericho 7 times before they realize, I have to fight battles in the promised land. And that is the part of recovery that we don't necessarily recognize. It's like you get sober, and I'm not talking about the person who may be listening or watching this that has like 3 months or 6 months. I'm talking about after that first year. If you make it to the 1 year, the statistics say 2 out of every 10 make it a year. And then out of those 2, only 30 or 40% of them make it to 3 years. But those that make it to 3 years, 80% of them make it to 5. So there's a flip in the percentages. And the reason is those that make it to 1 year, 100% of them, that, do all the work and they get to that year, a good majority of them set short-term goals and they only think about low-lying fruit. And they accomplish that. And after they accomplish that, there's not, like you just said about the response we have to joy or anything goes away. And eventually life is so freaking boring, we get high again to make it exciting. So it's like, yeah, you can set some short-term goals. Typically, it's like, I want a guy, a girl, I want a boyfriend or girlfriend, I want a car, I want a house, I want a job, basics. And then you get all those things, and then you're like, now what? So now the now what is where the internal journey becomes possible. That's where the cultivating of the person you're going to become begins. You gotta get through that first year of haze and gaze, and you're just like, what is going on in my life? And if you can make it through that first few rounds of really bad decision making that we do in that first year, then you can begin to be like, how do I become present in my life? And then that cultivation. So for me, it's like helping people understand that the process of transformation, of real recovery, is bigger than just getting sober, right?
Yes.
And then it's going to be an internal journey rather than just a superficial journey. And it usually isn't going to begin until maybe a year, maybe 9 months, but it's usually like, hey, let's get you to that year. Right. And then you're thinking a little bit clearer. But now obviously everything, sort of happens simultaneously. So you do some things, but you won't really start picking up on the things that you're doing, on the habits and the disciplines that you're using and utilizing until after that first year. And I think that's when that cultivation of being present, and that's where your expertise really comes in, of so many of the mindfulness techniques and breathing techniques and learning how to self-regulate, because none of us know how to self-regulate, and so we numb with things, and we end up being numb, which is part of why we can't remember what we did last week, because we're numb throughout the whole thing. We live an emotional, reactionary life to what we think we feel rather than reality. And all of that plays into the cultivation of self and cultivation of that person that you truly can transform into with the work. Recognize the battle is coming. The journey has just begun. And you're going to have to really dig deep on this journey. And I think that's where you come in, man.
Well, and I think, just to balance that real quick, because everything you said was spot on. In the beginning process is having a proper understanding. And I don't think a lot of us got that kind of roadmap, or, hey guys, it's not going to be easy. Here's what to expect. You're going to it could happen a little of this for you, a little bit more. It could happen a little less for somebody else, but it's kind of ugly in the first 6 months to a year. It's going to be, and then you got to escape. See, and here's what hit me while you were talking. It's kind of like the person who's been in prison for 20 years. I was in prison. I spent a lot of time incarcerated off and on during my unsuccessful drug addiction career. And so I spent the longest straight time was 4 years. And even after 4 years, I came out of there and I was institutionalized. I think when people get off of drugs, especially the ones that have been on drugs and struggling for a long time, they're chemically institutionalized. And what do we do? What do institutionalized people do when they get out of prison? They go home, they sit, they don't come out. They kind of just keep doing time, even in their house. That now they've got a little freedom. They go to the refrigerator, get a pop and things like that. I think that happens to the recovering addict as well. And you were talking about finding things to numb out. That's what we do. That's whether it's Netflix and chilling and with wishful thinking, where we think somehow tomorrow our success and everything that we're going to be is going to arrive without effort. And we just keep tomorrow, the next day, and we're not being intentional. And I think one of the things that people can do when they first get sober, and maybe after the first 90 days, is learning how to be still for 5 minutes. Maybe even start with 2 minutes of just being still. And what that looks like is sitting still for a minute, literally physically sitting still. I mean, you're probably going to be fidgety, like I'm fidgety on this podcast, but being intentional about just listening to your breath and just sitting there. And if you can't close your eyes and your mind's racing all over the place, because your brain's still healing, so you got to have compassion for yourself. And that's another big thing that we could talk about: having compassion for yourself, mercy for yourself, love for yourself. And those are whole concepts that could be taught on and expanded on for another 3 or 4 hours, well, months even. But getting in that first place of cultivation, if you're just getting sober, to where you can start to lay the foundation for some of the things that you're going to cultivate later. And that's simply for 2 minutes, getting there and, setting the intention of, you know what, I'm just grateful to be so chemically free today, without substance. I'm just grateful to be toxic relationship free today. And if you're coming out of something, some abuse, some trauma, I'm just grateful to be safe today. I'm surrounded by security and safety. And so I'm going to sit here with the heart set of gratitude. And what does that even mean? Maybe you have to teach yourself what gratitude is. But once you get the definition down, even if you're not feeling it, you just say, I'm thankful I'm safe. I'm thankful I'm sober. I'm thankful I'm chemical free, whatever it is that you're going to say. And you set that intention, you go, and you just take a few deep breaths. And then if your mind wanders, don't get upset with yourself. Just gently bring it back to your breath, gently, without judgment, without criticism, without, oh man, just, I need to focus back, that silly mind of mine. And your brain will go crazy at first, but eventually over a period of time, you'll go from 2 minutes to 5 minutes to doing other things that will lay even stronger foundations in your future. But just getting started with something that simple will have tremendous value for your future.
Let me just share this. So I have worked in the recovery field for almost 18 years. So let's think about what's changed in 18 years. Wow. And I've personally seen. Now, I mean, I'm going back to 2006 when I really got started for my first job, late 2006, 2007. I mean, cell phones weren't a huge thing. Laptops weren't a thing. Facebook, Twitter, all this stuff, they weren't things, okay? And so it was a whole different conversation then about sitting still, being in the presence of the Lord, or just your own self. And even then it was a little bit challenging, or a lot challenging. But then, tack on a cell phone to our hand. Now everybody's addicted to things. So you got cell phones and emails and laptops and visual screens everywhere. I mean, I've literally seen, the face of what recovery looks like change over the years. Because of now we got to adopt a policy for this. Now we got to, how do we handle smartphones? I mean, over the years, I've literally had to go from like, a phone comes out. It's like, who can have a phone? Okay. No phones. Okay. Only okay, you can have a flip phone. Okay, no internet on your phone, no smartphones. It's like every 5 months having to rewrite a new policy,
right?
Because these things happen so fast. Facebook, guys dating girls on Facebook or sending money to people that don't exist on Facebook. Anything to not face who they were inside.
Man.
And probably it was back in 2017, I think it was. I had a friend of mine come on, and he was going to work in the office with us, and he couldn't do it because he didn't come from an addiction background. And he's like, it's just too chaotic. I can't be in this environment. And one of the days he came in, he actually tried to do a Devo with the guys, and he simply did this. He said, all right, everybody, we're going to try to sit still for 1 minute in silence. It like ruffled feathers, like within the like, these guys couldn't do it. They were angry about it. I mean, that's how hard it is for people early on in recovery.
100%.
And then tap on, and there's just this issue with, it's sort of like So, sex addiction is very
Mhm.
complicated because you end up, it's a natural thing. And a lot of times if you're a sex addict and then you get married, how do you balance like sex, with your husband or your wife and all of these factors? Well, now it's like instant, access to Facebook and Twitter. It's like you have to have a phone because to live in this world today, you have to basically, yeah, of course you could go against the grain. I'm not, obviously you could. My wife would be like, no, you don't. You could do it without it. Anyways, most people need a phone. Um, you're directly tied to things that you're addicted to is the point I'm getting to, which is
Right.
similar to being, a sex addict and in marriage. And so we have to find a way in which we can learn to be at peace with the work that needs to be done in order to grow as a person in our recovery.
I think that starts with managing expectations. I think when, like I said, and this goes back what we were talking about a little bit ago, a lot of people don't get that. People don't come in and say, "Hey, bro," they'll tell you one, they'll give you statistics. 3 of you are gonna not be here in a year, and it's like, what the crap, dude? I hope it's not me. And 10 of you are gonna freaking die in 10 years. It's like, dude, like they don't. Nobody wants to hear that, right? You're not gonna scare me to sobriety. Actually, you're gonna make me go get high, right? But that's been a tactic, because I want to be oblivious to all of that, So I think managing those expectations, having a proper understanding of what the journey looks like, and knowing that it's not going to be comfortable. And obviously, you've got to use discernment as to when to dole that roadmap out. Because if you lay it on thick in the first 24 hours, I'm not go tell, hey, it's going to be terrible. You're probably not going to make it. But if you do, it's going to be rough. Like it's having that discernment, which comes with experience, which is where you're at. You've been doing this for 18 years. And then also having properly managed expectations. And that's even for the sober people that are continuing in sobriety, because we all know people who have been sober 20 years who just gave it up and said, you know what, I want to just drink every night at 6 o'clock after I get off work. And, the rest is history for them. So it's a continual maintenance program. It's a continual working on yourself and cultivating. Most people in this, let me just backtrack. In this is a unique opportunity that most people in this world will never get. You have the opportunity as a recovering whatever, meaning addict, sex addict, trauma survivor. You have the opportunity to begin again, which most people never get. They're clueless to the realities of change, or to even have the ability to abstractly think about what their life means, what direction it's going, and they're content with just sitting in front of the TV every night at 7:30 to watch Jeopardy. That's not you. You desire more. That's why you got on drugs in the first place. A lot of times is because you were extremely bored, unstimulated, and obviously some trauma in there. But you're in a unique position there, or we all are in a unique position to be really awesome at life, to be really intentional about life. And then also, as we're healing, as our story starts to bear fruit, we can make a difference in so many people's lives, even the people who have never touched drugs. You can
Mm-hmm.
awaken them to possibility. And so, going back to what you're talking about with phones, dude, phones make every addiction harder to kick almost, because you've got ads that are custom tailored by the algorithm. You talk about Bud Light in the room, and all of a sudden Bud Light starts showing up on your screen. And all of a sudden some chick that's in recovery, you got a sex addiction, but she's wanting to say, I'm 21 days sober, in her little scantily clad bikini for a guy. And he's like, well, it's a trigger. We can't
Mm-hmm.
avoid triggers. So they're all around us. We can be safe and secure for a little bit, but at some point we're going to have to step out in the world. And that's why in the Uncovery, you talk about community, and having
Mm-hmm.
that sober community, or having that intentional community around you that's all about your healing process and all about your good and your well-being.
It's even, part of what was beautiful about this morning with my men's group is it's like guys that I've been in community with for 8 years now, and we can have these conversations with each other and hold each other accountable. And if you're watching or listening to this, even if you're not somebody struggling in any of these areas, this is for you, because you need to know this is what it takes to live a recovered life. This is what it takes to become transformed. And here's the thing, for those that are struggling, that are hearing like the techniques that Brian is sharing, you're ahead of the rest of the world. So many people, here's the thing. I realized this the other day. It's like something happens and we react to that something, but we never really stop to ask ourselves, how do I feel? Why does this make me feel this way? We just know that's how we're supposed to act, or that's just the next thing I'm supposed to do. We're not in touch with what's really happening inside of us. We're living like we're in the Matrix. I'm supposed to get mad at this. I'm supposed to yell and scream at that. I'm supposed to smile at this. But what are you feeling inside? And so those in recovery, that if you hear Brian's techniques, and you're going to be learning a lot more as Brian and I make more podcasts like this and put out more content like this, if you can learn these things, the rest of the world is totally fine just being on autopilot. They're totally fine not knowing why they do what they do. All they know is if take that blue pill. All they know, not if you're on drug, if you're in recovery,
no pills.
No pills. It's like, if I got a boat and I can drink a 6-pack of beer on the weekend, I don't really care why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. I got a big house and it's like, yeah, you got the dream, whatever. But don't you want to know who you are inside? Don't you want to know why you do the things you do? Don't you want to, have you ever stopped to think, like, do you even really like the things you think you say you like? It's like mental work is the biggest thing that people fear. People are at their core level. M. Scott Peck in The Road Less Traveled says it this way. People are lazy, and thinking takes a lot of energy, a lot of protein, all of that goes into thinking. So people are simply okay with just being like, I vote this way. I like this type of music. I like this type of women. This is who I am, without ever really thinking, why do I make these choices? Why do I think these ways? And the problem with that is a lot of those people wake up one day and they're miserable,
right?
And they're unfulfilled. And as in recovery, we don't want to wake up that way one day, right? Because we'll get high.
100%.
So do the work.
100%. And not only that, if you have the inkling suspicion that there may be more, or that there might be some reason you're here, working on yourself, exploring who you are, where you're at in life, will get you on the path to finding out what you were actually created for and put here in the first place to do. And I think that goes along. So the uncovery, along with, you keep mentioning Brian's techniques, but all of this stuff's free and available and stuff like that. But I think bringing these two elements together of community and practice is going to be profound for a lot of people, including myself, including you. We're not just speakers; we're also doers of what we're talking about here.
Amen.
Is going to have a profound impact in the community of recovery, and I'm excited about the journey. I'm excited to see what the Lord does in my case. I love the Lord. The Lord is and I know you do too. You're Pastor George Wood, tattooed pastor. But it's also available for those who are a little bit gun shy when it comes to the faith-based community. These things work.
Absolutely.
Regardless. They're the laws of the universe. God created the universe. He wrote laws into existence to govern it, whether it's the law of physics or the law of meditation or whatever. And I just made that one up, but it's there for everybody. The Bible says that he causes it to rain on the good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
So it's available to all, for everybody to have access to. My hope for anybody who would practice these things or try to come into this is to find the source, the author of it. That's my hope for
Amen.
people, to get plugged into that. And so,
Yeah.
man, what a beautiful conversation.
This is, man. And listen, I'll end on this, is that if you're new to recovery or you're new to being around people, and let me just tell you this may seem like, basic, or like this is, common sense. No, it's not. Recovery has been done the exact same way since 1940, basically. And this type of stuff, yes, there are people that have broached it and got into it, but mainstream recovery, this is not mainstream recovery. This is not what you will mainly hear in people that have done recovery for the last 30 years. They do 12 steps, they do their meetings, they do their sponsors, and I'm not knocking all that. I think that's beautiful. However, there's more. And this type of stuff of getting into contact with your inner self, understanding regulation, understanding meditation, understanding breathing, understanding who you are as a whole human being rather than just a drug addict trying to get sober, is not common speak in recovery. At least it's getting there. It's getting better, but it just hasn't been. Which is why when I first got into recovery 18 years ago, I turned to alternative methods than what people normally were doing. And so I'm just excited, Brian, that we're on this journey. Go ahead. You're going to say something?
Well, even the founder of AA, Bill W., turned to some alternative methods in the end. So and that's a whole nother podcast, but it's, the journey is unique. There are there's some stepping stones, not to be cliche, in recovery, that mile markers that everybody sees, but the journey in between, that's unique and specific to you. And so finding that freedom, finding that liberty without that religious, rigid way of going about things, while at the same time leaning into your community to help keep you guided and on the right path is huge and instrumental.
Amen. Amen. I'll leave you with this. The most terrifying Bible verse for me has always been where it's Jesus and these religious leaders come up to him and they say, Lord, Lord, I have been doing deliverance in your name. I've been evangelizing in your name. I've been praying in your name. And Jesus looks at them and says, away from me, for I did not know you. And that should terrify most of us, because it's a deeper philosophical question that he's asking. I did not know you because you did not know yourself. There's this work that has to be done internally to match the external works that we do. And if you don't do that, and you don't go to the heart of the Father with your own heart, then he does not know you. And so, before a theologian attacks me on the internet, maybe that's not even what the verse means, but that's how it speaks to me. And I know that it's a possibility that that's similar to what he's talking about. I know Jesus wants us to know ourselves, and he wants us to know who he is inside of ourselves. So contemplate that. And join us again next time we get together. We'll be sharing more of these. We'll be going deeper into the practices. Maybe they're not Brian's practices, but the man's got some wisdom at it. And we'll be going deeper into those practices, and we can all grow together. Peace.
See ya.